Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Tiffany Hunter. I'm an energy healer in the United States. Welcome to the Life Made Easier podcast. Here we're going to be talking about ancient wisdom, but we're putting a modern approach on it. Every episode, we're trying to share some useful information about the world of energy healing. Specifically, we want to develop and enhance energy intelligence so that you can take that information and make your life easier in simple and practical ways.
And I'm Dr. Karen James, a psychologist and energy healer in the UK. One of the things that people often say when we're talking to them about energy healing, and I know this is something Tiffany and I have talked about quite a lot, is it all in the mind? Is it like the placebo effect? Are we just imagining it? So in today's episode, we thought we would try and unpick that a little bit, and we're going to talk a bit more about what is commonly called the placebo effect, what that means, how we understand it, and how that might fit in with energy healing and the results that we can see and the benefits from that. So I think probably we should start, Tiffany, by defining what is the placebo effect. So tell us, Tiffany, what is the placebo effect?
The placebo effect, do you know, it occurs to me, I don't even know where that name comes from. Do you? It's probably got some Greek mythological background.
It's probably a Greek
fascinating
name
that I'm sure we're missing.
Yeah.
It is when there's been a positive change. Usually, in this case, it's in somebody's health, right? When something positive has changed from a treatment that is actually inactive or has no known therapeutic treatment. So one of the most common examples would be if you give somebody a pill and it makes their pain go away, but it's actually a sugar pill. So there's nothing in that pill that is actually an active ingredient that would change anything. But it does because it's the power of the mind or the power of the imagination. And back in the day,
can I interrupt you for a second? Because I was thinking, I have also seen it, studies that have looked at it in relation to things like sports performance and giving people things to help them get faster times or that kind of stuff. So I think that's the other place that it commonly shows up, just to interrupt you for a second.
Oh, wow. I've never seen it used that way. That's fascinating. Take this and your speeds will get better.
Yeah, and they do.
Or you'll jump higher.
Yeah.
And they do.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Back in the day, it was a really dirty word, wasn't it? I mean, I've been doing this forever. So back in the day, people would ask you that question and they would consider it an antagonistic question. Well, how do you know that's not placebo? And people would use it in research as their control. Right? We're gonna test whether or not this pill works, and this placebo is going to be our control group. And people still use it that way.
It's really problematic because, and it may be part of why. It makes for a very complex way of looking at medical research because if it could be that some of why a drug isn't showing up as significantly more effective than placebo is because there's actually something happening with the placebo effect. So does that necessarily mean that the drug isn't also effective, but the placebo group are also getting some benefit? So trying to unpick what is the benefit of the medication and what's the benefit of placebo is a whole kind of feels like quite a minefield for more scientific brains than mine.
Yeah. And why it was seen as, in a derogatory sense, the imagination is because the idea is that it's not a real medicine that's changing, that's creating the effect. It's the person's imagination that's making the effect happen because they believe that there's real medicine in the pill. Their imagination is what's making the change in their body.
Yeah, so the idea then that there isn't actually a real change, they're just imagining a change, I guess. Yeah.
And then I think you start to fast forward a little bit and some bright spark starts to realize, hang on a minute. No, this is a little bit more than just inconvenient. This is a little bit more than just messing up my control group. There's something going on here. There's quite a lot of change that's going on in this group that isn't getting any medicine. What's happening, and then you start getting some studies that are looking specifically, well, how far can we take this? How much change can we actually make with placebo? How far can the person make changes, I guess, to things like speed and performance, but also to things like pain management and anxiety and health without an active agent that they can actually do, which I guess, which is how we started to have this conversation to tease this out, which is really essentially self-healing.
I think the thing that particularly kind of blew my mind about this was that study that we've talked about at Harvard Medical School. And I think they've done a few studies, 2016, 2024, where I think this for me was a thing that was really like, wow, that is amazing, that they traditionally research with a placebo group. People wouldn't know which group they were in, so they wouldn't know whether the pill they were taking was the sugar pill or the whatever, or the actual drug. And the idea behind that was then it wouldn't be, it couldn't be placebo. It was trying to rule out placebo, like minimize the impact of placebo, because everybody would kind of assume they were on the treatment. And but they did a couple of studies where I think it was all to do with pain, where they actually told the people in the placebo group that they were in the placebo group, and they gave them bottles of pills that they had to take regularly that were labeled placebo pill. But I think the key part of the study is they would give them some information about the placebo effect, how it works. And, that I think they told them things like, it's important you take this regularly. Placebo effect is real. It isn't just all in the mind, and it is something which you can, which can happen. It might still work, kind of thing, was, I think, some of the key information. And people in the placebo group, compared to the take pain relief as normal kind of situation, reported better effects than, they had less pain than the people who were taking their pain relief as usual. And at the end of the study, they were asking people were asking the researchers for the placebo pills. Can I keep taking those placebo pills, because they've really helped me?
Wow.
And it's kind of like that. I remember kind of reading about that and just going, wow, okay, that's really, what is happening there?
Yeah. Well, it really goes to the heart of, again, especially some of the older placebo studies, where a lot of the ceremony behind it was that it was about duping people. It was about tricking them. Where you had to put people in white lab coats, you had to hype their authority, you had to give them elaborate instructions, and maybe even warn them about the side effects of these very powerful placebo sugar pills. That it was all about sort of hyping it up to get their mind to believe that these placebo pills were going to do something. And what you're saying really goes against all of that, that you could actually just tell them the truth, and you could still enlist whatever healing mechanism was going on, and that they would want that.
Yeah, and I think then that takes us to the part where, well, how is this relevant to us as energy healers? And if people, obviously at the moment, what we do, there's limitations in how you can measure what we're doing with a person. And I mean, there's a few things, I guess, that you if you were doing some research, you could measure, like somebody during the treatment. Most often people do become more relaxed than they started, kind of thing. So there are things like that we know might be beneficial for health. Being more relaxed, enables important parts of our system to work better, like our immune system and our digestive system, being in a less stressed state. But what's actually then happening, and, to a degree, because we often throw around this question, like, do you need to believe in energy healing to benefit from it? And the answer is complicated, because to a degree, no. Like, there are things that the energies we work with will just do, like water will hydrate. That's the nature of them. So they will do that thing. And we also really recognize the importance of engaging someone's mind. Like, we need to have the whole person on board, with the idea that there is at least some possibility that whatever they're struggling with can change in some way for the better. And I think, I don't know about you, Tiffany, but I've often understood that, at least in part, by we are supporting the body in a sense to, as you said, self-healing, to heal itself. So whatever that part of us is that is always striving to fight off disease, to ease pain and inflammation in the body, to be in the best state of balance that our body can be in whatever environmental state we find ourselves. It's like a lot of what energy healing does, I think, is really support that, help create conditions where that part of us, that inner healing capacity, is maximized. And when we can do that, then all sorts of things happen.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think there's good neurochemistry behind that too, of getting people's entire selves in coherence with themselves and coherence with the person that they're working with. And when that happens, whatever kind of treatment you're getting is going to be more effective. And I think belief is really the bridge between any kind of healing that we do, energetic or any kind of alternative healing, and also allopathic medicine, because what you just described is true in our work, but it's also true in the most traditional medicines, right? There's
Absolutely.
there's what do they call it, the nocebo effect?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You know, the opposite is if you don't believe in your MD, if you don't believe in your surgeon, the opposite is going to happen. You're going to get worse results in that treatment than if you do.
Yeah, there was a study where they injected people with, I think it was a saline solution, and people got more pain relief, reported more pain relief, when the person administering the injection was kind of warm and empathic and nice to them and, sympathetic to them, as compared to someone who was very cold or distant or even just neutral. And I mean, Tiffany, you and I both started our professional lives in the world of psychology, and, people will often talk about different types of therapy, talking therapies, and which is better and which is better for which problem. And is it better than, for example, antidepressants? And so even compared, talking therapies to medication. And consistently, the results show that the most important thing is the relationship with the therapist. It matters much less what someone does. And I think, or how someone goes about their work. And I think we are beginning to understand that now, in terms of things like nervous systems regulating to each other. If we as healers have a grounded, calm energy and create a space that feels safe, and as safe as possible, and comfortable and welcoming and supportive, and we're giving people our attention, our time, we're giving them a chance to, we're asking them their point of view. Something I often ask my clients is, if they tell me what a doctor's told them, I say, do you agree with that? What do you think about that?
Yes. Yes.
And we're then helping their system to kind of adjust itself to our, hopefully, as balanced as possible, kind of calm, system that can, help someone's own body to then come into a better alignment and be in a more relaxed or more open to healing state.
Mm-hmm. As you say, I think it's where the mushy stuff meets the hard stuff. Because, well, because on the one hand, you can conceptualize it theoretically as demeanor and warmth and the soft skill sets of the therapist, and the belief system of the patient or the client, right? But as you say, there's actually quite a lot of there's some neurochemistry going in there too, in terms of aligning as well. So it's really on both sides. And again, the more we know about the nervous system and the chemistry involved in all of this, it's not just the more subjective measurable things, the more subjectively measurable situations that this applies to. It's not just self-reports of pain or self-reports of pain and nausea and sadness and things like that. There's also been studies where in Parkinson's disease, in placebo effects, they also saw a real increase in dopamine levels when they actually did brain imaging, right?
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's extraordinary to be able to do that. And in the study that I'm thinking of, this was at the University of British Columbia, they had the same effects that were in the image as the active medication as the placebo effect. And that's not subjective reporting. That's objective. So again, it's where the mushy stuff meets the hard stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, as well, because like, I mean, there are pain clinics which for people who have chronic pain, where they're looking at how can we help people manage their pain. And we know our experience of pain is to a degree a subjective experience. When we feel otherwise warm, comfortable, safe, etc., we are likely to manage pain better than if we feel cold or hungry or under stress or in an unsafe kind of environment. And why would we not want to kind of, maximize that, support the body to be in as best a state as possible? And being, and again, even though that's subjective, to a degree, what do they always ask you in hospital? Rate your pain out of 10. It's right. 9. And like it's a very kind of clumsy measure, but we know for ourselves this pain feels unbearable or bearable, or this pain makes me want to reach for the pain meds and this doesn't. And it's kind of it is subjective, but that our relationship to it and what else is happening in our system can really have a big impact on how we experience it, how bad it is, how we cope with it, how our body copes, and I mean, there's an idea that some people have, like, their pain receptors get kind of almost over sensitized, so they can kind of end up in arguably more pain than their body is actually in, because something in the wiring has gone wrong. So again, all these things they're not black and white. It's not as simple as saying, well, you're in pain or you're not. And how can we support your body to be as relaxed, to be as comfortable as possible, and to really make sure whatever part of you does that inner healing can be working as well as possible. And we have to have your mind on board with that as well. That's not I can't even think of the word. It's like, that's not trickery. That's not kind of our mind is, we can't divorce ourselves from our mind or what our mind thinks about what's happening in our body.
Yeah, I mean, the wonderful news about all of that is whatever complicated biochemistry is going on to change those dopamine levels in Parkinson's patients that are showing up on the imagery are very accessible with very accessible means, right? Those sensory details of light and touch and sound and meditation and taking a moment and a belief system and having a rapport with your therapist and all of those things that we're doing in the treatment room that enhance that experience, that's how you do that. Right? That's the doorway into those things. So I think the more that you stop seeing it as trickery and the more you start seeing it as the pathway to those biological changes, the more the more doorways you can walk through to get those changes.
Yeah, just because we don't understand the mechanisms fully yet doesn't mean not value, of genuine value. They're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I mean, there's very, very little research on the effectiveness of energy healing. There is a bit of research on Reiki specifically as one vibration of healing energy that we work with, and probably the most commonly known, I would think, of the energy healing modalities. That Reiki actually does seem to have a greater benefit than just what they often call in research like therapeutic touch. So where somebody isn't trained as a Reiki practitioner but might just hold their hands in a similar or the same pattern to somebody who is a Reiki healer. Although I'm always kind of interested in that, because if you do that, you're still putting your energy system into someone else's energy system. So that raises a whole load of other kind of questions for me.
Well, and I would, remind you that acupuncture is an energy healing, and acupuncture is widely researched. And in fact, acupuncture is so well researched with good evidence-based medicine that it's now pretty well across the board nationally, at least in America, accepted by health insurance here, and actually so well accepted that people, including people like you and I, often forget that it's an energy healing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, did you think there was a pharmaceutical inside those needles? Like, what did you think was happening?
Yeah. What am I being injected with? Nothing.
Yeah. And I've had a number of people tell me that their bridge into other energy healing modalities has been through acupuncture, and has been specifically through horse acupuncture, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they'll say that they saw their horse getting acupuncture and they saw the benefits of that, and there was no way that their horse, again, back to the placebo, there was no way that their horse could somehow make it up or lie about the improvements that it was making to them. And so if it worked on them, on their horse, it might work on they themselves. And then they saw the benefit for themselves. And then once they realized that the purpose of the needles was to move the energy through the energy channels in the body, and that maybe the energy channels could be moved in other ways as well. And oh wait, that means that energy channels exist. And oh wait, there's energy anatomy? Wait, what? And now we're off to a whole other conversation. It opened up a whole world for them.
I've actually heard the same with Reiki and horses. Like, people, and it's fascinating that people will try things with their animals that they won't always try for themselves. That people have had a Reiki practitioner come and do some Reiki on their horse, and the horse has seemed really relaxed and to really benefit from it. And then they're like, oh, maybe I should try this. Another study to do with Reiki, actually, that I recall that was I've also has always stuck in my head. Unfortunately, I can't off the top of my head remember the reference for it, but it was to do with side effects from cancer treatments like chemotherapy. And people who were, so the treatments, people were having similar, really toxic kind of medical treatments. And they weren't looking at, does this make a difference to the cancer? But they were looking at the differences in people's capacity to cope with the chemotherapy, which, sometimes people have to stop chemotherapy because they can't cope with the side effects, because it's so difficult for many people's bodies to cope with. And the people who were receiving regular Reiki through their cycles of chemotherapy generally reported much, they managed it much better. Like, they had less nausea, they slept better, they kind of coped with those horrible side effects from it, which, nobody wants to have chemotherapy. But if you've got to have chemotherapy, let's try and do it in a way that's going to support you to cope with it as best as possible.
Yeah, I think, second only to acupuncture, and to be fair, a quite distant second to acupuncture, Reiki is the most well researched energy technique. I think you and I are planning. We've already talked about doing a body memory and episode about really getting into what's happening with information in the body and information in the
Hmm.
energy and how it's held in the body. But I think that really is dovetails with this because that's what we're talking about,
Mm.
right? We're talking about how does any medicine, whether and any healing, right? Whether or not that healing comes from the pills in a bottle that say placebo on them or the pills in a bottle that say something else on them, how does that mechanism get the body to change the information inside of itself, to change its structure, to change symptoms, to change a condition that we call a disease? And if we can figure out how that mechanism works without an active agent, right? If we can figure out how it works, how we do it, how are we
Yeah.
doing it? What are we doing? What is it about the frequencies that we're drenching a body with? What
Hmm.
is it? How do we do that? If we could spend a drop of the money that we spend on the other stuff trying to work that out, we'd live in a very
Yes.
different world.
It's interesting because you make me think like we know, although we can look at these quite powerful effects with, these medication studies, we know it's not as simple as you just take a pill.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've probably all had, or many people will have had experiences of reading something or a friend suggests, oh, try this supplement, it will help, blah, blah, whatever problem you have, and then it doesn't help. So it's not and your friend might have been raving about it and you were like, oh, really hopeful. Oh, I really hope this helps me. So it's not a question of not having some, kind of belief. But it doesn't necessarily work. So as you say, kind of what is the mechanism that's going on
Mm-hmm.
there? And, we also know, like anything, that we can't help 100% of people with 100% of their problems. I wish we could. Um, and in part, I think that probably is because we are, we're very complicated beings, and there's a lot of different things that affect our, we can't completely change somebody's genetics. We can't, you know, completely change their childhood
Mm-hmm.
experiences or the, you know, degree of pollution in the air they breathe or all those kind
Mm-hmm.
of things. There are many, many variables that contribute to our current state of health or otherwise. So we're probably always, and I would say that this for any medication or any treatment, we're always working with a relatively small part of what we actually have some control over
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't been genetics or
Right.
environmental factors that are already kind of in place.
Mm-hmm. And that's
And
that's before we even get into the metaphysics of any of that.
yeah, and if we could bottle that, if we could when it really does have a
Yeah.
very, very positive effect for somebody, then that's that would be kind of amazing.
Well,
We'll keep
I'm
working on
yeah, we'll keep working on it. And I'm curious if this is your subjective experience as a healer, but mine is that, and what I'll say to clients is that it's roughly like when you are throwing a ball and where your arm goes, where the ball goes, is where your eyes are looking.
it.
And
Mm.
so where you point the energy is where the body goes,
Hmm.
right? So when you've got somebody on the table and you're trying to create a change, I have it, and again, it really comes down to this like very micro level of again, like the information, the structure, the
Mm.
set of the body, right? And you're trying to move it from point A to point B, from a point of not health to a point of health, and trying to get it again, like you're trying to get the body to go in that direction, and you can feel it when it goes and when it's not going, and if it's not going, then you got to change techniques, and there's a kind of
Hmm.
yielding, and I'll often have the experience of, okay, it's gone, it's moved, it's where I need it to go. Now the question is, when that person comes back, is it going to still be there? And so that
Hmm.
person comes back, and you're like, oh, great. And then the question is, well, is now the arm going to follow? Right? Right? Is the rest of the body going to follow? And so most of the time, thank goodness, otherwise I wouldn't be in business, the rest, then the dense material follows it.
Mm.
Right? But there's that delayed reaction of the changes have been made and now everything follows along with it. And I think I'm curious what you think, if that's your subjective experience, but I think if we're going to nail down what's actually happening, and when we do it to ourselves and we call that placebo, or if an external agent does it, either with a pill or with somebody like ourselves, like that's the level where it's happening. That's what we're trying to really identify, what's going on there that moves from that point A to point B, that then the
Hmm.
rest of the dense material can follow it.
Yeah, and just in case anybody isn't quite following, when Tiffany's saying dense material, I think you're saying like the physical.
The
So,
physicality of it.
so
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
The
the
energy
physical.
part moves and then the body moves afterwards.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean in Ayurvedic medicine, I think, or Chinese medicine, I can't remember. They talk about problems showing up in the energy first,
Mm-hmm.
um, and by the time it shows up in the physical body, it's usually been there some time. I mean, not unless it's like an accident type injury, but generally it will
Of
have
course.
been building kind of. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say, add to that, really, I mean, absolutely agree with you, but would add to that is, because you said there's like sometimes a sense of like it's not moving, where for me there's sometimes very, very explicitly, sometimes it's almost like saying to the body, here is where you could be, and then
Mm-hmm.
seeing if the body is ready to be, or the energy system is ready to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to slow down, and that, I mean, that's common, particularly with trauma of any kind, physical trauma or emotional trauma. The body needs time because it's been holding itself in this place, which will have come partly through to be protective. And we come along and go, but you could be over here. And the body's going, but I don't know, because, okay, this isn't great, but I don't know about what's over there. What does that look like? And then it's like it takes our bodies, our energy systems, a bit of time sometimes to kind of go, oh. And also, the other thing I find sometimes is, yes, amazing if you do a session, you hope you've had a particular effect, and then people come back the next time and go, yes, that was great, it stayed, but sometimes you need to do it a few times,
Oh, for sure.
like the body will
Yeah.
slip back, it will change a bit in some way, then it will slip back, and then it will, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like you need to do it a few times, into which almost like a kind of muscle memory, like we,
Mm-hmm.
first try and do a particular dance step, or uh work, exercise at the gym or something, and it's kind of feels all awkward and clunky, and then you do it a few times, and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is, I'm finding
Mm-hmm.
the kind of groove with that. uh yeah, so I think that happens sometimes. I mean, that's part of our skill as energy healers, I guess. When can we push a little bit more? When do we need to slow down? When do we need to try something else? And we also need people's minds on board to, because sometimes change can be scary, if, especially if people have been living with a particular symptom or problem for a very long time and have tried lots of other things. It can be, I mean, it can be quite scary to think, is this actually going to help this time? And then what is my life going to look like when it does?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that can bring up its own kind of anxieties that can kind of get in the way. And maybe that's almost like what is that mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
that emotion that might be blocking things in a way, and needing to support people to, again, feel safe enough to allow that change to happen that they absolutely want. They just, something is kind of holding back.
Well, I think that comes back around to the container, making the things that we do. Why there was a sense that for this to work well, there needs to be a certain amount of pomp and circumstance, right? There needed to be a white coat. There needed to be let's talk about the instructions for these placebo pills. Why the people in that study didn't feel like they could go buy a bottle and stick a label on it themselves. They wanted it to come from the doctors. Even though they knew they were placebos, they needed to have the container, the emotional container handed to them. There needed to be some help with getting their mind and their identity on board to have that feeling of structure and safety. And because you can't fake that. You can't just pretend that's not real. All of us has to move forward together.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that's, I feel like we may have more to say about this at some point, but hopefully that's given you a little bit of a sense of how we understand the placebo effect as kind of fitting in with energy healing. If that is ever something that you've thought about, maybe a question you've asked or heard people say about energy work, and as we said right at the beginning, can often be in that quite dismissive way. And in a sense, maybe the placebo effect isn't a kind of a mystery to solve, although something definitely to understand better, but perhaps a reminder really of how deeply connected we are, our mind, our body, and our energy, and that with the right tools, whatever they are, whether they are medication, whether they are, belief, whether they are care and attention, can sometimes quickly, sometimes over a longer time, actually reshape our biology, kind of have a positive physical effect on us. And yeah, that having a label of placebo or energy or intention, could just be different ways of describing the same kind of truth, that having a connection and being supported in lots of different ways really helps to heal and helps our bodies to be in a good place to heal themselves.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for being here and spending this time for us. We appreciate your support. Please find us on all the obvious social media places, and we'd love for you to become a member on Patreon. And being a member has all kinds of fantastic perks, like journal entries and questions to think about, as well as actual experiments to try out into the world yourself, so that you can improve your own intelligence. See you guys next time.
Bye.